Welcome to Ground to Grow, a living conversation between two best friends exploring the tension between living in rhythm with ourselves and the structures of the world. Hello, my name is Aparna Majmudar. I am a nature-informed coach and facilitator.
And I'm Lily Levey, a menstrual cycle coach and a yoga teacher. Let's start these next 4 episodes that we're going to record with a quote from Carl Jung. The word of gods and spirits is truly nothing but the collective unconscious within me. And with this one, we will delve into the 4 archetypes of a woman's life, which plays out in our lives and also within our cycles: the maiden, the mother, the enchantress, and the crone. And in this episode, we will discuss the maiden. So let's get to it.
Let's go.
Hi, Aparna.
Hi, Lily. So good to see you.
So let's start with a short cycle check-in, as we will do in all our episodes. So what cycle day are you on right now?
I'm on cycle day 10, so coming up towards the transition from spring into autumn. I tend to ovulate on the early end, and yesterday I could feel a huge shift in my energy. So already missing spring and slowing down or being a lot more intentional with rest.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good. Yeah. And I'm on
You?
cycle day 13, already past ovulation. So I feel similarly that I have less energy, and I had a few mood swings yesterday, for example, and I felt like really emotional, felt like crying a lot, which tends to happen right after my ovulation when I turn into my inner autumn. And it seems like it happened a bit earlier, or like, yeah, around the same time as usual. But yeah, it can be a bit difficult these few days. Yeah.
Yeah. How are you
Yeah.
supporting yourself?
Hmm. I didn't.
Mm.
But I should. Yeah, I will look into it. And probably tomorrow I'm gonna go to the sauna and enjoy maybe a cold plunge. And I think that will help me get back to life a bit more. Yeah.
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 Sounds really delicious also.
Hmm. Yeah.
Great. So we're
And
talking about some archetypes.
yeah, the 4 archetypes of a women's life. And there are many more, but the big 4. And also, these are archetypes of the cycle. So we can apply these
Mm.
archetypes for the menstrual cycle. And I think this is already really beautiful. Like, we could apply it to our life as women and to each of our cycles. So each of our 4 weeks, let's say.
Yeah.
I think this is really magical.
Yeah. I totally agree. And what's been really interesting for me learning about archetypes just organically is the pattern recognition that comes in it of like, oh, that I'm expressing in this way, or these people in politics are expressing in a certain type of archetype energy, and noting that and feeling more informed of what are some dynamics that are playing out.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting to see how this plays out in the world,
Mhm.
and also to see that it doesn't matter what age you are, you can embody these archetypes in to some extent in your life.
Right. It's not limited to time periods of one's life.
Yeah.
What is the main archetype or certain archetypal energies that are active? You can be a maiden when you're 80, for example.
Yes. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. And every time you're in your follicular phase during the
Yes.
cycle. So that's also great. I like
Yes.
spring energy.
Or also if it's a new moon and,
Exactly.
waxing crescent moon, that can also have maiden energies activated.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. So in this episode, we talk about the maiden, and that's the first one: spring energy, new energy, and like this maidenhood. In regarding the menstrual cycle, is when the first bleed starts. So like childhood, teenage years, something like that, right?
Right. So the way I see it is the maiden is transitioning from a child into fuller womanhood. But there are many different ways of relating to the maiden. For example, like in pop culture, the maiden is the most attractive phase of a woman's life, like generally like mid-teens to max 30, right? Like maiden energy, this freshness and love of life and curiosity and warmth and opening a lot of doors of what's possible. Uh, and there are challenges here too, because you can have the wounded maiden and you can have the empowered maiden. And the wounded maiden being such that she's basically prey. She hasn't accessed her intuitive wellspring, and society, especially older men, know this. You can smell it coming around the block almost, of someone who's so fresh faced and so open minded, and not necessarily having boundaries, not saying no, like I'm just not interested in having this conversation. Um, Sometimes this like wounded maiden is simply just so thirsty for that attention. And remember, like she's transitioned from being a child, and in those childhood years she had the authority of her parents, and maybe it was her church or temple or society at large, but there was a very strong authority figure in her life keeping her safe and telling her what's right and wrong. And so moving into maidenhood and expressing as maiden comes with the risk of not challenging that conditioning and just accepting the status quo. Um, and it's such a interesting period of individuation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What I immediately thought of when you were speaking about this, that the wounded maiden comes from not having this structure when she was a child, for example. So maybe the
Mm.
lack of safety in childhood or those very formative years could lead to not having that guidance to have boundaries, not being able to say no. So I feel like that maybe those foundational elements were not there, and that's how I think the wounded maiden is becoming.
Oh, I'm so glad you say that, because I agree, right? Like if
Mhm.
you look at childhoods where a child is given the freedom to self-express and to challenge the authority in a healthy way, then they're supported knowing that they can access themselves and they're fully an individual. They are not an extension of parents or their culture. They are their unique, individual, autonomous self. And so I love the distinction of like, if there wasn't that support in childhood, and I think both of us can really relate to that,
Yes.
being told what to do and to not challenge our parents, uh, that leads to a natural consequence of being a wounded maiden. menarche.
Yes. Yeah. 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 So I think thinking about it, maybe the maidenhood starts after, like the first 7 years are very, very important. So it's like when the brain is like a sponge, and
Mhm.
whatever you say to a child, she or he would think that it's reality. So they would not question it at all. So what you say goes, and it's the truth. And after that, that's when the questioning starts. So maybe that's like this 7 year border is where like the individuation starts. What do you think? Like based on you being a mother, like
Yeah.
have you seen this?
I actually think children are questioning all the time. So for example, like the main word a 2-year-old says is no. And as a caregiver, as a parent, it can be approached with like, you do what I tell you to do because I'm in charge versus like, okay, maybe in 5 minutes you want to go outside for the walk, right? Like it actually starts from the beginning. I can also see it coming from an Indian culture where what living here in Denmark, exposed to different modalities of parenting.
Hmm.
But with what I know of a lot of parenting from my background culture is like you force feed the child. They have to have a certain amount of volume in their system in order to grow, and you decide what's appropriate. And if they don't, like, you force it into their mouth, and so already then they're it's so sad, but then the child has the choice. Of course, it's pretty unconscious of like, I have to accept it or I lose some level of safety with my
Yeah.
parents. And it's such a shame. And so being in an environment where, my children have been around other children too, where they get to decide. They get to decide what they get to wear and when they eat and how much they eat, and maybe they don't want to eat what's on the table. And that needs to be accepted. And of course then it gets into the questions of like, okay, what happens if you're hungry because you opted out? Um but really, like, this respect for bodily autonomy, emotional autonomy, psychological autonomy starts as soon as a child is born. But you're right in terms of the 7 years of like the first 7 years is this like magical thinking realm, because of the brain development and the space or the realm in which the child inhabits. There aren't those edges between like, this is reality versus this is my imagination. And it's so fun to be with kids that are in that space of transitioning, and like watching them like wake up of like, oh, okay, mom, like that tooth fairy, like that whole story, like you played that game really long, but we're calling you out finally. Like let's let that one go. And tell me more about the world, how it works. And that's very necessary when we talk about maidens. There's a lot not being told to women of how the world works. And one example is how definitely when I was raised, how it was handled when I communicated my first bleed to
Hmm.
my mom, who then told my dad immediately, and I was like full of shame because it wasn't normalized in the family to be bleeding, menstruating woman. And I also was raised in a religious system where you couldn't sit in front of the altar in the house or go to temple if you were bleeding. Like, God forbid you brushed up against a man or a boy in temple, like completely like sacrilegious. And
Yeah.
and that was so fascinating to hold. Like, this is so natural. I know intuitively bleeding is so natural, and I don't know how to like manage like bleeding through my pants and dealing with all that, let alone the 4 seasons of my cycle. But something's off. And I think that's the alarm call for all maidens of like noticing like, wait, this does not make sense. Or maybe I'm getting creepy vibes, or it just doesn't add up. Whatever the situation is, so critical to listen to that inner voice.
It is. It is. I think that's the challenge. That as I remember my own, yeah, like teenage years, the good girl conditioning that we basically talk about here, this compliance, was overruling all my instincts for a
When did
very
you
long
shift?
time.
When did like
Hmm. Yeah, I was just thinking that for the first time I ever saw my parents for just human beings, not for my parents, like the
Mhm. Not
authority
as God?
figures.
Mm,
Yeah, God, yes, was when I was like 21 or something like that. So around that age. So much later, not during my teenage years. Yeah, yeah.
hmm.
And I think it already happened after I moved out and I wasn't living with them anymore. So there was a distance and
Yeah.
that helped to gain a new perspective on them. And then there were other times when I had this realization later and later in life, like they um, they are also just yeah, children trying to be adults, I guess.
And doing the best they can,
Yeah,
and very likely raising, I assume they raised you the way they thought was safest for you in the world,
of
right?
course.
And there's so much compassion
Yeah,
for our parents for that.
I think more and more as
Yeah.
I'm getting older. Yeah.
Yeah. They could not have known what they didn't know. Like, there weren't conversations happening like the one we're having, or there was no social media, they didn't have
Mhm.
access. And I know for my parents there was just a lot about survival as immigrants in the United States.
Mhm. Yeah, 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 yeah. I
Yeah.
agree. I agree. Yeah, yeah. We are really blessed with all the information that we have. Sometimes it's too much, but it's much better. We are much more well informed about these topics, and also we are free to talk about these things. I think this is huge, and slowly, slowly, this whole topic is not taboo anymore. Yeah,
Yeah,
we are getting there. Yeah.
that's
But it
beautiful.
definitely was when I was going through my first bleed and
Yeah.
those years. So I'm curious, like, how was it for you? If you want to share, were you prepared?
Not prepared.
Not prepared.
I didn't think I was dying, which I have some female friends who didn't see anyone bleed, or, I had seen my mother in the bathroom, and I have an older sister. So I had some awareness, but the amount of blood, that was a surprise. Like, there was just it was like the floodgates were open. And I think that can be common, of just like having a lot of volume and not really understanding like the timing of changing pads. And like, I mean, I was in the 5th or 6th grade, so just that, like, okay, how do you go to the bathroom when you need to go to the bathroom? There was a swimming pool in my school, and my mom's like, "You're just not going swimming on the days you're bleeding." And that was also really, like, interesting, like, does it have to be this way? And there was simple shame about it. But luckily, like, I did figure it out over the years, and it's been really, um, beautiful to change the story. Having 2 daughters and a son now, talking about this stuff, and really supporting these natural processes
And
and making it
celebrating them,
okay. Hmm?
and celebrating them
Celebrating them.
even. Yeah, let's go that far. We weren't offered this option. Um, I remember that it was just shame for years around my period, around my cycle. There was nothing that were said about the cycle itself, but it was just my period that I had to go through. And it definitely was a burden and
Mhm.
very, very painful for me in the first few years. Like each period was just immensely painful.
So,
And yeah,
cramping?
yeah, lots of
Mhm.
cramping. And I couldn't go to school, for example. It was that bad. And I couldn't really talk about it with anyone other than friends.
Mm.
But within the family, it was just take the painkillers and then it will go away. This is just something that you have to deal with. There's no other way. And I was not prepared either to have my first bleed at all. There was no open conversation about it, which I think it's still very, very painful for me to think back. And it's something that I still wish to heal in a way. And even after, and there wasn't any support. It was just
Mm.
like, it's maybe disgusting, or you just want to throw away the pads as soon as you can. So even the blood was not something that was looked as natural or seemed as natural. Like, it was not something that was sacred, which I think it is
Absolutely.
now. Like it's a huge shift that I experienced once I started to get familiar with the cycle, and I think it's really really amazing. And I'm still thinking when I have my period, like it's not. I also had a lot of blood, so it was really challenging to. I was really exhausted in the beginning all the time, and I
Mm.
remember my first bleed lasted for 3 weeks, actually. Like, was
Wow.
so exhausting. And now I still think that if men bleed, that we would live in a different world, because this is like such a sacrifice each month, and then a serious physical thing that you have to go through. Yeah.
I totally agree. I mean, it's a initiation,
Yes. Each
uh,
month. Yes.
each month.
Especially in the beginning, but yeah, even after that. I
And it's so interesting to hold the the physical, emotional, energetic challenge of it, and also recognize, like, that provides, or it can extend one's capacity to hold difficult things.
Mm.
And it's interesting for me to, like, reflect on, wait, maybe I need to stop using all my capacity to hold difficult things and, like, cut them out more or say no more. I mean, we talked about no in our first episode, but it continues to come up of, like, just because I have the capacity does not mean I need to exercise it. And this
Mhm.
really goes to the younger maiden that I was, and staying in a marriage that did not fit me for way too long, because I thought, okay, I can figure this out. I can read the books, do the courses, raise the 3 kids, go to work, all the things, rather than what I think one of the most important medicines is space and reflection. Like, really taking time away from active parts of our lives and settling into ourselves and feeling the feels, right? So not taking painkillers on my period, but rather like lying in bed a bit more. And that's really interesting for me that like I had this strong river current of maidenhood well past becoming a mother. Um Maybe I still have some blind spots now, but the initiation of pain, in my case, the divorce and moving out and a very long continued divorce process, teaching me about myself and how to exercise the no quicker too. It's
Mm.
interesting.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking while you were talking that in 2 episodes later, we will discuss the wild woman, enchantress, the witch, which is the third archetype in this journey. And I just feel like it's the rebirth of the maiden later in
Ooh,
life.
okay. I really look forward to that
Because
conversation
I
to
mean,
learn
like saying no and then, like prioritizing yourself, and it's like a second spring, as they call like menopause, the second spring.
more.
I think this is something to be said about this, that it's very similar to the maiden. So I think that's also really beautiful that if you haven't had a chance to have an empowered maidenhood or maiden years, then you get a second chance to born again once in that
Mhm.
era. So yeah, I think that's what you're feeling.
Maybe. It feels good.
Maybe.
It feels
Feels
good.
good.
It feels like I'm standing on my own 2 feet, and I got me in a way that I need me, right? Like, I need to be self-actualized and independent in order to I mean, looking forward in order to really have the life that I want.
Hmm. Yes. Yeah. And I also think that we couldn't expect this from the maiden, this self empowerment from such a young girl. My feelings are that the maiden should be protected, even
Mm,
though she is maybe, 15, 16, which is a very average age to have your first sexual experience, for example.
mhm,
But you might not be ready to do
mhm,
that, and not emotionally, and maybe not even physically.
yeah,
And I think there's a really big responsibility on the parent side to
mhm,
not let go of control in a positive way, obviously, not forcing anything, but also not letting go entirely, to protect her, to provide safety and understanding, because it could be a very formative experience to have your first boyfriend, sexual encounter,
mm,
in whatever shape or form. Yeah, that could define your whole life, basically. Yeah.
yeah. It's incredible. So much. Like, there's so much vulnerability that the
Yeah.
maiden holds, um, and often it's almost like she's the last person to know, or she doesn't wanna know. She doesn't wanna be told, like, "Be more careful."
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's been really interesting for me to learn more about the mother wound. I mean, right now you spoke about the parent's responsibility and just learning about the mother wound and like the main role of a parent is to nurture, protect, and only when those two are are done can a parent guide.
Mm.
And I've been really reflecting that on that dynamic in my own life of where was I not protected, nurtured, and where did I like dismiss any guidance because I'm like, why would I listen to you?
Yep. Yeah.
Mm, and and yet, then who's there? Who's there to protect these young women? And what generally happens is that she gets further initiated beyond having a menstrual cycle, but from her experiences. And then she wisens up from experience and how integral that is to living. That cannot be taken out of the equation. No amount of like teaching anyone anything will overcome the need for life experience.
I agree. I agree. And I was also not the one who wanted any guidance. So
Mhm.
I remember that I just wanted to do my own thing and yeah, experience everything. Yeah.
Did you find guides from other places like books or practice rituals, journaling?
I would say not so much. Later in my 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's very challenging. Yeah. There's definitely a grief that I feel about this, that um, this cannot be changed anymore. I can maybe rewrite the story to some extent. I can nurture myself, and I can nurture my inner maiden, or like inner child, let's say, the way that I wanted to be nurtured or wanted to be protected. But yeah, it's not the same. It's something that I think I have to accept. Yeah.
Yeah. And it might take your whole life, right? To
Yeah.
be in that process of acceptance. But I
Mhm.
do want to note, if you're willing to speak a little bit about this, you're also in a maiden era now too. Wouldn't
Yes,
you say that?
I am. Yeah. And it's interesting because, okay, so the context is that I'm getting married again in 5 weeks. And it's a very exciting period of my life. And there were times when after my divorce, I was thinking that I will never get married again because there was such a loss of faith in this whole
System? Construct?
system. Yes, construct of marriage and also in men, let's say it. So,
Mm.
um, but I've been rebuilding my whole life. A lot has
Mhm.
changed. Countries I moved, jobs I changed, and then after lots of therapy and lots of meditation and all these other modalities, I came to the conclusion that I love myself enough for the first time in my life. So I'm at the point where I can prioritize myself. And not so interestingly, I met my now partner after that realization. And I think I also knew um, my boundaries, like what I don't want, and that was super important to really say to myself, these are the things that are non-negotiable, and I'm not going into any kind of partnership if these things are present. And and of course, there was kind of a list of qualities that I want in a man and want in a relationship. But the most important was that I feel uplifted for who I am and supported in who I am. And I think this is really beautiful to experience. So like it definitely feels like a second spring, but it's more this enchantress era that I'm feeling
Okay.
around this than the maiden. But it's
Yeah.
really good that you highlighted that this is also maidenhood. So I will
Yeah.
reflect on this for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing that. I was also thinking about your upcoming move where, yes, there's a lot of connection between the maiden and purity and youth and innocence, but fundamentally, it really is about potentiality
Mhm.
of she's an explorer, she's curious, she's open to the new, and she can't but go out and and see what's out there and do that exploration, even if at some point she returns home, right? And so I was speaking to that too of
Mm,
there's a lot of, new life, new growth energy in your life right now,
I
including
agree.
with this podcast that we have.
And also this podcast is definitely the part of this. And for a second, I want to bring in a tarot card.
Yes.
We agreed to include some cards as we explore the archetypes, and I think this is the perfect time to introduce
Okay.
it, and it's the Fool, which is number 0 in the tarot, actually. So I really like that also that is 0 and it's not even 1, because that would be one step further. And just to show you, if you're watching us, and if you're not, if you're listening, then you can look up the Fool in the tarot.
Mm.
And he has everything to move forward from this square one, 0, let's say.
Mhm.
I really like the positivity of this card, and just the energy, the surge of energy that it
Yeah.
embodies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that, like, outward facing, upward looking, anything's possible. I have my dog, I have, like, I guess there's food in what he's carrying.
There's food in the bag, there's
Yeah.
nice flour, and even though he's on the edge of a cliff, yeah, it's like it's a very positive card. So it's like whatever happens, I'm ready for it feeling.
Mm.
Yeah.
I love
I
that.
also have a dog, so yeah, very
Aw.
fitting card. Yeah. And and also it's the year of the fire horse, and I feel like there has been so much movement already in this year. So, like, one day after the fire horse year started, we sold our apartment here in Hungary. And
Hmm.
then, like, in 2 days, that was on the market for two
Amazing.
days. Incredible. And then we started rearranging our life to be able to move.
Mhm.
Um, but it's also really beautiful that, I mean, not really in context, but we just had an election in Hungary, and then there was a really, really big change of events for the better. And I feel like that's also fire horse energy and like really maiden energy to some extent, because we've been in not a really nice era for 16 years.
No.
And now there's so much hope in the air here, and everyone's really optimistic about the future. And yes, our move to Denmark is also something to really look forward to, and a new beginning. Even though I lived in Denmark and I really liked it, I feel like it's also like a second return, that I could do things a bit differently and with more awareness, I feel like. So I'm more prepared for this move and what's coming. And I feel like it's really good that I'm not necessarily going into the complete unknown with this move,
Yeah.
as it was with all my moves. So we will talk about this, I guess, in the span of our episodes. But I've moved many, many, many times, like 30 plus times in my life, and many countries. A lot, a lot. I have a list of the places I lived in, and it's so much, really. And I feel like I'm ready to come home. I came home to Hungary too, but ready to have a second home and still have this as a home base. So full circles, and also in the tarot, there's always a full circle. So the
Yeah.
end card of the major arcana is the word. So once you accomplished everything, you come back to the full.
I love that.
Yeah.
So, it reminds me of this quote that goes, "If you get away for long enough, soon you'll be on your way home.
Yeah.
Just something like that, right? Of like every um movement towards something else is actually a movement towards oneself, like that inner homecoming of now I know myself more. There's more discernment with every cycle. And once again, it's that spiral path of a continuation, a deepening, and an ascension at the same time. Like, that's so cool and exciting. And you're also coming to Denmark and getting married on very different terms than
Mm.
previously.
Oh, yeah.
And how how delicious that is that your life has changed so that you are so much more empowered and autonomous and exercising your full agency and shaping the life of your dreams. Like, I'm so happy for you and, really just wishing you the best in this continued journey of life and excited
Oh,
to witness and be here with you.
thank you. Thank you. I'm also really excited to be much, much closer to you.
Mhm.
Uh, this is also such a blessing. So yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
I mean, that reminds me, I know I've been talking to you, about all these articles I keep reading about friends who are moving in with each other or,
Mhm. Yeah.
sisters who, like, move in their husbands and then they get, like, a big house together because it's harder to afford. And what I'm feeling in that is that, like, clarity of, like, this is important to me, and so I pursue it. And just coming back to, like, the wounded maiden, and I'm speaking for myself, but also some patterns I see in society of, like, wanting to be chosen and, almost giving away power, usually to an external source, whether it's, like, a school system or a partner or something status related or a big home that doesn't fit, as was in my case previously.
Yeah.
And the difference in the energy of like, wait, no, now it's on my terms, and I really am very powerful. I'm immensely powerful to create life that works for me. I'm not saying it's easy, and there's a lot of challenging decisions that need to be made, but there's this sense of possibility and potentiality that's really beautiful.
Mm, so amazing, really, to live through this, and I reflect a lot on what has happened in the past 4 years for me. Um, it's going to be my wedding is going to be almost to the day 4 years to
Mm.
the day when we separated with my first husband.
Oh.
So it's really like a full circle moment for me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And a lot has happened. Like that was definitely the darkest period of my life after divorce and starting a completely new life, being away for 10 years from Hungary and
Mhm.
coming back. That was extremely challenging for many reasons, and especially emotionally, but also financially. And my safety net just dissolved basically at that moment. So I feel like what has happened since and all the memories that I had here during these 4 years are just, I'm really cherishing those for sure for my life. Yeah. Yeah.
That's really beautiful.
Mm,
Like that acknowledgement and pausing to to note what has passed and what was needed to happen to get to this place.
exactly. Yeah.
That winter that comes before the spring, and that was a harsh, harsh winter.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. So this really feels like spring and yes, a new beginning for sure. And I feel like another aspect is that finally I'm ready to celebrate this properly.
Mm.
And I'm ready to prioritize myself and my own needs and wants and not be ashamed of them, for having them.
I love that. I love that. I mean, in previous conversations when we were talking about dating post-divorce, you're like, "Don't compromise." And I'm like, "Wait, what are you talking about?" Like, I thought that's how you get to any agreement with any person is compromise. Um, and it reminds me of the Bluebeard fairy tale, which I'm not gonna go into details right now, but it's such a compelling story of following one's, like, desire and curiosity and the cost of that in certain, constructs, right? Because the desire, the curiosity, the "I want things a certain way" is not wrong. It's not
Yeah.
wrong, and it's actually more a question of, is it compatible with what I'm committed to, whether it's a partner, a job, a lifestyle, and there's so much pain in actually really looking at that and then taking the action of like, well, for me to be me, that means I can't continue doing that thing.
Yes, that's the key to it. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. We will have an episode on this whole
Mhm.
topic in a few weeks when we're gonna be together in person here, and I think we will discuss this deeper because this is a huge topic for both of us. So I think it's worth talking about it more and more.
You mean the divorce episode?
The divorce episode, divorce and second marriage.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Second.
but like it's also amazing for me to see that you're in such a different place, and both of our journeys were like almost parallel in time, and
Mhm.
what happened was also like very similar to some extent. So yeah,
Mhm. And that's such a gift of of
it is.
sisterhood, being in relationship with others, being open, like sharing when things are really hard. And then what I also note is that by being in conversation, especially women in conversation with other women, there's more a transfer of like tools and perspectives. Whereas when we're so isolated and not sharing, then it's easier for us to like spin in our own heads and think we're the problem. Think it's like hormones or like, no, I need to just like make this work, even though there are signs that it's not working. And sometimes we cannot see them or hear them or smell them. And once again, this goes back to the Bluebeard story with like the older sisters being able to see what the younger sister was unwilling to see because it served her and her ego to not see this. Um, and it leads to immense consequences. And that's such a gift too of like honest conversations among friends of like, you don't need to suffer, or are you aware of this pattern or this dynamic that you might not be seeing?
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I think this is exactly why, for a girl in her teenage years, like guidance is needed from someone older.
Yeah.
But also, as we talked about, guidance is not necessarily something that a teenage girl wants. That I also acknowledge that, but I feel like yeah, maybe from not from someone very close, What I was thinking, what I would have needed was maybe not my mother or grandmother telling me things, but
Mm.
someone maybe closer to my age, but more experienced.
How do you think someone could find that?
Hmm. Such a good question because I actually never said this out loud before. Like, this is what I would have needed.
Yeah.
Um, but
Also,
yeah, I mean, tightening communities would be, like,
mm,
or creating communities would be an answer to that, I guess. to just
Yeah.
naturally have more people around you, different ages, and yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
I agree, and I hope that I'm doing right by my kids as I try to create this and try to throw them in a group of, other kids 'cause, several friends that I have, like, collectively, we are so outnumbered by our kids, and then they span several age ranges, and I'm pretty clear and luckily share the thinking that the kids should not be on electronic devices when they're together. So they start cooking, they go for a walk, they figure things out. Maybe the youngest or the oldest stays at home. But that network that is not necessarily completely convenient or comfortable for my kids is what I'd like to believe a gift for them.
Mhm. Mhm. I'm sure.
And
I'm
I
sure.
think it's really scary with what kids are exposed to on social media, where it's like Fitspo and like all this beauty stuff, and just things that are very disempowered slash wounded maiden without recognizing that it is so because it's it's a tension seeking behavior actually as opposed to um being more deeply rooted into it doesn't matter how I look, but am I self-expressed?
Mhm.
Am I
Mhm.
okay with myself?
What I see is that both these things are playing out on social media. So for this
Okay.
younger generation, I see that it's very different from when I was a teenager. So, okay, we
Okay.
didn't have social media.
Yeah.
And that was a good thing, I guess. But for them, what I see is that they self express in a really nice
Okay.
way, which is not about vanity, for example.
Mm. Okay.
And maybe it is about attention seeking, but also that's something that's just gonna happen in that age, I guess, which is like it's normal. I wouldn't expect um, the kids of that age to be any different because they just don't have enough experience to be different. That comes later. Like
Mm.
we evolve later, we grow later based on our own experiences. It's more about yeah, I come back to the same conclusion, just like protect them. So I think that's good maybe to monitor what they're doing somehow. I don't have kids,
Mhm.
so you have more experience in this, but yeah, it can be very dangerous. And as we talked about in the beginning, to fall prey to an older man, which happens a lot. And then we have a lot of news about pedophilia and like
Mhm.
abuse of this kind. So. That's
And
something that's super dangerous for the maiden, I feel like.
yeah, and it's so rampant. And once again, what I'm picking up on is that confusion between like the it's like a flower or a leaf that has sunshine on it of like that joy of being seen and the risk of being preyed upon, manipulated, groomed, whatever it is. Uh, and what it takes to know the difference of like, this is, clean energy and attention as opposed to someone who has a different agenda than you and wants to get something and extract that like spark, that life force energy or whatever it may be.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
that comes from guidance, right?
Yeah.
Or, talking about what's happening in a song or in a TV show or a movie with these younger people.
Mhm, mhm.
I think my kids
Yeah.
are totally tired of me, like, analyzing every piece of content that we come across. I'm working on it.
Oh, but I think it's better to do so than,
Thank
not
you.
doing it. I
Thank you.
think so. Yeah. So, thank you so much for this conversation. And what I want to tell our listeners is that I created a meditation, a visualization. If you want to have a different relationship with your maiden and your menarche, your first bleed, then this visualization will help you um, have a deeper connection with yourself and maybe rewrite that experience so you can heal if you had a challenging experience. Yeah. So it's going to be linked and feel free to listen.
Sounds really beautiful. I'm gonna definitely do it myself. And I will be sharing a retelling of the Bluebeard myth, which I touched upon in this episode. So just keep your eyes out for that upcoming extra episode on Bluebeard. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And in the next episode, we're going to talk about the mother archetype. So exciting. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sounds
Ah,
great.
yeah.
Take care,
Bye,
everyone.
everyone.